Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Before we start, let me introduce myself first. My name is Juju Fatika Sari. I'm from class TBE 2C. I'm here to fulfill the final test of reading assignment. The test is through telling the novel that we read during this semester. So the novel that I choose is titled Sense and Sensibility. Sense and Sensibility is a novel written by Jane Austen and her first published work under the pseudonym Lady in 1811. A work of romantic fiction, Sense and Sensibility is set in the southwest of England between 1792 and 1797. Describe the life and love story of Daswood's sister, Eleanor and Marianne. This novel tells the story of two young girls in their new home, a small cottage belonging to their distant relatives where they experience affection, romance, and heartbreak. So let's get started. The story of the novel Sense and Sensibility begins in the past, where in English countryside there lived a rich man named Mr. Dashwood, who has been married several times. When Mr. Dashwood was about to die, he instructed John's son from his first marriage to take care of his second wife and three daughters. Three daughters to Dashwood by his second wife were named Eleanor, Marianne, and the little one, Margaret. According to the law that existed at that time, Mrs. Dashwood and his three daughters had no right to inherit Mr. Dashwood. John also agreed to his request of his father. However, John's wife Fanny has a tendency to be greedy. Fanny convinced John that they should move into the Dashwood house and kicked out Mrs. Dashwood and her three daughters. Therefore, Mrs. Dashwood and her three daughters must soon be able to find a new place to live. One day, Fanny invited her brother, Edward Ferrars, to visit the Dashwood family. Unexpectedly, Eleanor and Edward then began to develop a very close friendship. This made Fanny feel uneasy because Eleanor came from a poor family. Therefore, Fanny told Mrs. Dashwood that Edward would lose his shares of inheritance if he married a girl from the lower class. Some time later, Mrs. Dashwood, Sir John Middleton allowed her and her three daughters to live in a small house located on Sir John's estate in Borden Park, Devonshire. Mrs. Dashwood and her three daughters moved into the house. Since then, they have often visited Sir John's house in Borden Park. One day at Borden Park, the Dashwoods meet a respected man named Colonel Brandon, who is a acquaintance of Edward's. Colonel Brandon, who is older than the three daughters of the Dashwood family, has had a crush on Marianne since their first meeting. Unfortunately, Marianne, on the other hand, doesn't share the same feelings for Colonel Brandon. That she thought he was too cold and wasn't sure that such a person could love or be easily loved by others. One afternoon, Marianne and Margaret decided to take a walk around their residence. However, not long after, it rained quite heavily and made Marianne slip and fall. Marianne is helped by a charming, handsome stranger. The man's name was John Willoughby, and he said was from the city of London. John drove Marianne's home. Since then, John and Marianne have spent a lot of time together and have become even closer. Marianne was captivated by John and gradually fell in love with him. One morning, Marianne thought John had come to propose to her. However, John actually seemed to be in a hurry to go to London. Some time later, Sir John's mother-in-law, Mrs. Jennings, invited his married daughter to visit with her husband to Borden Park. When he came to Borden Park, Mr. and Mrs. de Palmer brought along one of their friends, Lucy Steele. When Lucy still spoke to Eleanor. She said that she knew Edward too. In fact, Lucy and Edward themselves had actually been secretly engaged since 5 years earlier. Mr. Jennings then invited the girls, consisting of Lucy, Eleanor, and Marion, to go visit the city of London. They then come to attend a dance party. At the dance, Marian unexpectedly meets John Willoughby again. However, instead of looking happy to see Marian again, John Willoughby actually seems uneasy and uncomfortable with Marian's presence. In regretting Marian, John Willoughby even pretends that he did not know Marian well before. He is cold and keeps his distance. In fact, not long after Marian found out that in the city of London, John Willoughby had just become engaged to a rich girl named Miss Grey. Marian also felt very sad and heartbroken after knowing this. Colonel Brandon, who also knew John Willoughby, then told Eleanor about his background. Apparently, John Willoughby was involved in a scandal. Willoughby once flirted with a young girl named Beth, the daughter of his former love, and dumps Beth just like that. When they heard of Willoughby's behaviors, his family, who had financed Willoughby's life, finally revoked Willoughby's inheritance right. That's the real reason why John Willoughby married the rich woman, Miss Grey. While they were in London, Lucy was invited to come to over to John's and Fanny Daswood's house. As Edward's sister, Lucy thought that Fanny would approve of her relationship with Edward. Therefore, Lucy finally decided to tell Fanny about her hidden engagement with Edward. However, the reaction that Lucy expected was far different from the reaction she later got from Fanny. Fanny, he mentally disapproved of this relationship because, just like Eleanor, Lucy also did not come from a prominent family. Fanny also kicked Lucy out of her house. Meanwhile, when hearing news of the hidden engagement between Lucy and Edward from Fanny's, Edward's mother asked them to cancel the engagement. When Edward refused this order, his mother disinherited Edward and passed it on to Edward's other brothers, Robert. This news then reached the ears of Colonel Brandon, who was a friend of Edward's. Feeling pity and sympathy for Edward, Colonel Brandon finally offered Edward a place to live. Meanwhile, in the city of London, Eleanor and Marian prepared to return to their home in the Devonshire. However, in the middle of their journeys, it rained heavily. Marian finally fell ill after walking for some time in the rain. When he learned about Marian's conditions, Colonel Brandon, who was still in London, picked up Marian and Eleanor. Colonel Brandon let Marian and Eleanor stay at his place for a while Marian was undergoing the healing process. Eleanor faithfully accompanied her sister. After Marian recovered, the two sisters finally returned to their homes. After that incident, Colonel Brandon often visited Bottom Park. During each of his visits, he spent a lot of time with Marian. Marian's feelings for Colonel Brandon began to change. He could feel that he was starting to like the figure of Colonel Brandon. Marian tells Eleanor that she has accepted John Willoughby's decision to marry a girl who is richer than herself. Marian realized that even if John Willoughby had chosen her, she felt that their love alone would not be able to enough to make their life happy. Sometime later, Mrs. Daswood and her three daughters hear that Lucy has changed her name to Mrs. Ferrars. They also suspect that the man from their Ferrars family that Lucy eventually married was Edward. However, their guess turned out to wrong, for not long ago Edward had come to visit Eleanor in Devonshire. Edward explained that Lucy did not end up marrying him, but his brother, Robert. In addition, Edward also reveals that his true love is actually Eleanor. Edward then proposed to Eleanor, and a few days after that, they were married. After some time passes, Marian also followed her sister Happiness when she received a proposal from Colonel Brandon. Colonel Brandon's feelings for Marian's family chief to be one side after Marian realized that she also loved that man. At Marian and Colonel Brandon's wedding, John Willoughby appears to be secretly watching all this from distance. John's Willoughby facial expression briefly shows of regret before he finally turned and left there. Yeah, that's all. That's a little story about the novel that I read. Thank you so much for your attentions. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.